What does true silence really sound like? It's a question we rarely think about. Is it the peaceful quiet of a forest at dawn? Or is it something else entirely? Is it the absence of noise? Or is it the crushing presence of a pain so deep it has no words? For a man and a dog separated by miles but bound by the same invisible wounds, silence was the only language they had left. And this is the story of how they taught each other to speak again. Our story begins in the small, perpetually misty town of Port Blossom, Oregon, where the relentless rhythm of rain against a window pane is the town's heartbeat. Inside a small, tidy house lived Liam, a retired Marine sergeant whose life ran on a schedule as rigid as the military code he once lived by. Coffee brewed at 0600, floors swept by 0700, locks checked at 2200. He moved with a quiet, coiled energy, a man whose body was at peace, but whose mind was still at war. The silence in his house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. It was the echo of what was missing. A year ago, that silence had been filled by the gentle thumping of a tail against the floorboards, the contented sigh of his partner, a magnificent Labrador named Major. Liam would never forget the feeling of Major's heavy head resting on his lap, a warm, living anchor in the turbulent sea of his memories. But an accident had stolen that from him, and in the deafening quiet that followed, Liam's own ghosts had returned to haunt him. He wasn't just lonely, he was adrift. Across town in another kind of prison, the silence was of a different breed. The Coastal Paws Rescue Shelter was a symphony of chaos, a cacophony of barks, yelps, and the desperate cries of animals hoping for a second chance. But in one kennel in the darkest back corner, there was no sound at all. There sat a chocolate Labrador so still he looked like a statue carved from fear. His name was a number on a cage card. His fur was dull and patchy. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't wag his tail. When volunteers approached, he wouldn't cower or snarl. He would simply press himself harder into the cold concrete wall, trying to disappear. He was a ghost long before he was dead. This was the silence of complete and utter terror, the signature of a puppy mill survivor. On the one-year anniversary of Major's death, Liam found himself driving without a destination. It was a day heavy with memories, and his silent house felt more like a tomb than a home. On an impulse he couldn't explain, he pulled into the parking lot of the shelter. He wasn't looking for a dog. He told himself he could never replace Major. But he walked inside anyway, a man drawn to a place filled with the very hope he had lost. He walked past the cages of bouncing, barking dogs pawing at the bars, their eyes pleading. He felt nothing. They were strangers. Then he saw him, in the back corner, the silent one. Liam stopped, and for a long moment the chaos of the shelter faded away. He wasn't looking at a sad, broken animal. As a sergeant, he had seen that same look 100 times before. It was the 1,000-yard stare of a soldier who has seen too much a soul that has retreated so far inside itself that no one can reach it. He didn't feel pity. He felt a sharp, gut-wrenching pang of recognition. He was looking in a mirror. The shelter manager, a kind but weary woman named Maria, came and stood beside him. "He's a ghost, Sergeant," she said softly, recognizing Liam from the town paper. "He was part of that big federal bust up north a few months ago. We've tried everything. Another family even adopted him. They brought him back in less than 48 hours. Said he was a shell, broken beyond repair." Liam's eyes remained fixed on the dog. A family had already given up on him. He was a lost cause. But then a detail snagged his attention. The story of a federal bust didn't quite add up with a simple, broken dog. His training kicked in the instinct to see the full picture. "Broken how?" Liam asked, his voice quiet but firm. Maria hesitated, then sighed. "They said he destroyed their laundry room door one night trying to get out. Not aggressively, just panicked. They found him covered in splinters, trembling. They were scared of him. They thought he was dangerous. And that's when the plot twist hit Liam a sudden, chilling realization. A dog terrified of confinement. A past shrouded in the darkness of a federal crime. This wasn't a case of a dog being broken. This was a case of a prisoner of war still fighting to escape. The family hadn't seen a dangerous dog. They had seen a desperate survivor trying to break out of his cell. He looked at the dog, then back at Maria. "I'll take him." Maria looked stunned. "Are you sure he's not a pet, Liam? He's a project. Maybe a tragedy." Liam's gaze was unyielding. He looked at the silent soldier in the cage, a fellow survivor trapped behind enemy lines, and for the first time in a year, he felt the fog in his own mind begin to clear. He had a purpose. "I'm not looking for a pet," Liam said, his voice ringing with a conviction that startled them both. "I'm looking for a mission." Liam believed he was starting a simple rescue operation that day. He had no idea he was about to step onto a psychological battlefield where the only enemy was the silence they both shared. He thought his mission was to save a dog, but he would soon discover that in the fight to reclaim a life from the depths of trauma, the most important battle you fight is for your own. And what would happen in the first 100 days of this operation would push him closer to his own breaking point than he had ever been before. Liam walked out of that shelter feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He had his mission. But here's the thing about heroism in the movies. It's a single glorious act. In real life, it's a quiet, grinding war of attrition fought 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute at a time. And in this war, Liam was about to learn that the first casualty is almost always your own hope. He brought the silent Labrador home and gave him a name, Anchor, because that's what Liam needed, something to hold him steady in the storm of his own grief. But from the moment they crossed the threshold, the silence in Liam's house changed. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the thick, suffocating presence of fear. Anchor immediately retreated into the crate. Liam had set up a small plastic cave that became his entire world. He was a ghost haunting a home he didn't understand. The first few weeks were brutal. Operation Homecoming felt more like a siege. Anchor wouldn't eat if Liam was in the room. He wouldn't drink. The slightest sound of the creak of a floorboard, the clearing of a throat, would make him flinch violently. Liam's carefully structured life began to unravel. He found himself moving through his own home like a ghost, terrified of making a sound that might break the fragile dog even more. The quiet that had once been Liam's fortress now felt like his prison, and he had willingly brought another prisoner inside. Now here's where most of us with the absolute best intentions would have failed. We would have seen this terrified creature and tried to fix him with love. We'd get down on the floor, speaking in a high-pitched, soothing voice, trying to lure him out with a piece of bacon. We'd try to pet him to show him we were safe, and we would have made things 1,000 times worse. Because to a mind shattered by trauma, an outstretched hand doesn't look like kindness. It looks like a weapon. Unpredictable movements and sounds aren't comforting. They are threats. But Liam wasn't most of us. He was a sergeant. And he knew that you don't win a war with grand gestures. You win it with discipline and strategy. He threw the conventional wisdom out the window and devised a new protocol, one he called Sir Silent Unvarying Routine. It wasn't about training Anchor. It was about reprogramming his own behavior. He made himself predictable. He made himself boring. He made himself as non-threatening as a piece of furniture. Every morning at 0700, he'd place a bowl of food and water just outside the crate, then retreat to the far side of the room and sit on the floor with his back to the dog. He'd read old novels aloud, not to Anchor, but to the room, letting the steady, low rumble of his voice become part of the background noise. He ate his own meals on the floor 10 feet away, never making eye contact, signaling in a primal canine language, "I am not a threat. I am not here to dominate you. We are just two creatures sharing a space." For 27 days, nothing changed. 27 days of reading to an empty room. 27 days of throwing away untouched food. The doubt began to creep in a cold poison in his veins. The shelter manager's words echoed in his head, broken beyond repair. Then, on the 28th day, a breakthrough. As Liam was reading, he heard a sound, the quietest click, click, click of claws on the hardwood floor. He didn't dare to move. He kept reading, his heart hammering against his ribs. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a brown shadow creep towards the food bowl. Anchor ate. He ate the entire bowl, then retreated back into the safety of his crate. It wasn't a victory march. It was a desperate raid for supplies. But it was a start. A few days later came the true miracle. Liam placed a small piece of cooked chicken on the floor, halfway between them. After an hour, Anchor slunk out, snatched it, and retreated. The next day, Liam placed it a foot closer. They continued this way, a slow, painstaking negotiation of trust, until the day Anchor took the chicken directly from his outstretched, motionless hand. Hope, bright and brilliant, flooded through Liam. He was winning. And then, it all fell apart. That afternoon, a logging truck backfired on the main road, a sound like a gunshot echoing through the quiet house. The explosion of noise didn't just scare Anchor, it shattered him. He yelped, the first sound Liam had ever heard him make, a raw, terrified cry, as he scrambled back into his crate, soiling himself in a wave of pure terror. And just like that, the ghost was back. He wouldn't come out. He wouldn't eat. The 28 days of progress were erased in a single violent second. That night, Liam hit his breaking point. He was exhausted, frustrated, and felt like an absolute failure. He looked at the trembling dog, a creature seemingly locked in a prison from which there was no escape, and he made a decision. He picked up the phone and dialed the number for Coastal Paws Rescue. He could hear the phone ringing on the other end, his heart heavy with the weight of his surrender. Maria's voice came on the line. "Coastal Paws, how can I help you?" Liam opened his mouth to speak, to tell her she was right to arrange the return of the broken dog. But as he did, his gaze fell on Anchor, huddled in the back of the crate. And he didn't see a broken dog. He saw a soldier pinned down by enemy fire, shell-shocked and terrified. And in that instant, the core principle of his entire life, the creed etched into his very soul, rose up and silenced his doubt. Do not leave a soldier behind. He hung up the phone without saying a word. He walked over to the crate, not with pity, but with resolve. He sat down on the floor, his back against the wall, and simply stood guard. He didn't speak. He didn't offer food. He just sat there, a silent sentinel, letting Anchor know he wasn't alone in the dark. It was in that moment of utter failure that Liam finally understood the truth. Healing isn't a victory to be won. It's not a straight line from broken to whole. It's a messy, unpredictable dance of one step forward and two steps back, and the only thing that matters is having the courage to get back on the floor and dance again. He had survived this first brutal battle of doubt, but to win the war, patience wasn't going to be enough. He needed to throw out the entire rule book and learn to speak a language older than words, a language communicated in the silent, invisible pulse of trust itself. That night on the floor, Liam didn't just recommit to his mission. He changed the entire rules of engagement. He realized he had been trying to teach Anchor how to live in his world, a world of words, commands, and expectations. It was a language Anchor didn't just refuse to speak. He couldn't even understand it. And so Liam decided if the mountain won't come to Muhammad, then Muhammad must go to the mountain. If Anchor couldn't learn his language, Liam would have to learn Anchor's. He threw out all the dog training books. The concepts of sit, stay, and heel were meaningless. You can't teach calculus to someone who doesn't know what numbers are. Liam's new mission was to become a student of silence. He began to watch Anchor not as an owner, but as a cryptographer, trying to break an ancient, complex code. He started noticing the things you only see when you stop trying to be heard, the almost imperceptible twitch of an ear. When a car passed the way, Anchor shifted his weight to one side just before a loud noise, the slight dilation of his pupils, that signaled a coming wave of anxiety. This wasn't a dog. It was a living, breathing barometer of fear. Feeling he was on the edge of a discovery, but lacking the key, Liam did something he hadn't done in years. He asked for help. He made an appointment with Dr. Anya Sharma, a semi-retired veterinarian, known less for her clinical practice and more for her almost mystical understanding of animal behavior. She was a small woman with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. Liam explained the situation, the progress, and the catastrophic setback. Dr. Sharma listened without interrupting. Then she gave him a piece of wisdom that changed everything. "Sergeant," she began, her voice calm and steady, "you've been treating the symptom, not the disease. You're trying to build a house on a foundation of sand. This dog's brain is stuck in a permanent looping state of fight or flight. You need to stop being a trainer and start being an interpreter." And then she gave him the key to the code. She explained the concept of calming signals, the subtle, almost invisible gestures dogs use to communicate stress and de-escalate threats. The lip licking, the yawning when not tired, the sudden, intense sniffing of the ground. These weren't random behaviors. They were sentences. "He's been screaming at you for weeks, Sergeant," Dr. Sharma said gently. "You just didn't know how to listen." Armed with this new knowledge, Liam went home and saw Anchor for the first time. He was no longer a puzzle to be solved, but a story to be read. And as he learned to read the language of silence, the breakthroughs began. They weren't loud or dramatic. They were a series of quiet, earth-shattering victories. There was the day Anchor, instead of hiding, followed Liam into the kitchen, keeping a safe 10-foot distance, but choosing to be in the same room. A week later, as Liam sat on the floor, Anchor walked over and gently touched his nose to Liam's outstretched, still hand, a gesture of trust so profound it brought tears to the stoic sergeant's eyes. Then came the first spark of the dog buried beneath the fear, a low, tentative woof, when the mailman came to the door. It wasn't a bark of aggression. It was the sound of a sentinel reporting for duty. But the most significant moment came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Liam walked into the living room to find one of his old, worn-out boots placed neatly beside Anchor's crate. It wasn't just any boot. It was the one Major, his former partner, used to love to carry around. It was a peace offering. It was a gift. It was Anchor in his own silent way saying, "I see you. I trust you. I am here with you." And a strange thing was happening. As Anchor's world began to expand, Liam's began to heal. In learning to anticipate Anchor's triggers, Liam became acutely aware of his own. When a thunderstorm rolled in, Liam found himself sitting on the floor, murmuring reassurances to the trembling dog, and realized that his own heart wasn't pounding in his chest. In creating a world of predictable safety for Anchor, he had inadvertently built one for himself. The hypervigilance that had plagued him for years began to soften. For the first time, he wasn't just a man with a dog. They were two sentinels standing watch for each other. The question of who rescues whom no longer had a simple answer. They were rescuing each other one silent signal at a time. They had finally learned to communicate, building a fortress of trust in the quiet sanctuary of their home. But the greatest lesson was yet to come, that true communication isn't about making noise, it's about being heard. And their bond, forged in silence and patience, was about to be tested, not by a memory or a backfiring truck, but by a real-world storm gathering just off the coast, a storm that would force them to face a trial by fire and reveal whether their silent language was strong enough to survive when the world started screaming. Months turned into a fragile, peaceful year. The fortress of trust Liam and Anchor had built was now their home. Anchor had transformed. He was no longer a ghost, but a quiet shadow who followed Liam everywhere. The fear was still there, a faint tremor beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a deep, unwavering loyalty. But peace, as any soldier knows, is always temporary, and the outside world was about to put their hard-won sanctuary to the test. The test arrived in the form of Liam's sister Chloe and her bright, bubbly 8-year-old daughter Maya. Chloe loved her brother, but she saw Anchor not as a survivor, but as a liability. "He's not normal, Liam," she'd say over the phone, her voice laced with concern. "You don't know his history. It's not safe for Maya." To prove her wrong, to show her the brave, gentle soul, he knew Liam planned a trip to a secluded stretch of the Oregon coast, a wild, beautiful beach that had once been his and Major's special place. The day started perfectly. The sun was a rare and welcome guest. The waves were gentle, and Maya, full of laughter, threw a piece of driftwood for Anchor, who, to Liam's delight, tentatively chased after it. For a moment, they looked like any other family. Chloe was even beginning to relax. But the Oregon coast is a place of wild, untamed beauty, and it does not suffer fools. Without warning, the sky turned a bruised, angry purple. The wind began to whip, tearing at their clothes, and the gentle waves swelled into monstrous, roaring beasts crashing against the shore with the force of a battering ram. And for Liam, the world fell away. The howling of the wind became the shriek of incoming mortars. The violent crash of the surf became the deafening roar of explosions. He wasn't on a beach in Oregon anymore. He was back in the sand, and the chaos, his body frozen, his mind trapped in a barbed wire prison of memory. He was gone. It was in that precise moment of his absence that the unthinkable happened. Maya, fascinated by a line of seaweed at the water's edge, didn't see it coming. A sneaker wave, a sudden colossal surge of water erupted from the sea, a liquid predator snatching her from the shore. She was gone in an instant, pulled into the churning, icy chaos of the Pacific. Chloe let out a scream, a raw, piercing sound of pure horror, but she was paralyzed, a statue of maternal terror. The humans were frozen, one by trauma, the other by fear. And in that critical second between life and death, the broken one, the silent one, the one they all thought was a liability, became their only hope. A sound ripped through the storm, a sound unlike any Liam had ever heard from Anchor. It wasn't a bark of panic. It was a sharp, percussive, commanding blast of sound, a bark that wasn't asking, it was ordering. It was the sound of a leader taking charge. That sound, that specific frequency of authority, was the only thing that could have pierced the fog of Liam's PTSD. It was the sergeant's voice he had been trained to obey, and it snapped him back to the horrifying present. His eyes focused just in time to see an impossible sight. Anchor, the dog who was afraid of sudden movements, was launching himself into the violent, raging surf. He didn't hesitate. He hit the water with the force of a torpedo and began swimming, not with the frantic paddle of a normal dog, but with a powerful, efficient stroke. His head held high, his movements impossibly intelligent, as he navigated the deadly rip current. He reached Maya, got his body between her and the pull of the open ocean, and began fighting, pushing her back towards the shore, with a strength that defied his history. Shaking off the last remnants of his flashback, Liam roared and plunged in after them, following his dog's lead. The man who had been the rescuer was now the reinforcement, a soldier following his commander into battle. Together, man and dog fought the relentless pull of the sea, and finally, gasping and freezing, they dragged Maya back onto the sand. They collapsed on the beach, a shivering, soaking heap of survival. Chloe was sobbing, clutching Maya, who was coughing up seawater, but was alive. She was alive. When Chloe finally looked up, her eyes filled with tears, weren't on her daughter or her brother. They were locked on the chocolate Labrador, who stood over them dripping and exhausted, his body placed protectively between them and the angry sea. The fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by a look of profound, staggering awe. In the calm moments of our lives, it's easy to judge, to label, to dismiss. But true character, the core of who we really are, is never revealed in the quiet days. It is forged and revealed in the fire, in the storm, in the split second when everything is on the line. Chloe and Liam thought they had just witnessed a miracle, but it wasn't a miracle. It was a memory, an echo of a forgotten legacy buried deep in Anchor's blood. And the truth of who this dog was and where he truly came from was a story far more shocking than the rescue itself. The story of the rescue on Port Blossom Beach became something of a local legend. It was told in the town diner, at the post office, and over neighborhood fences. The quiet, reclusive sergeant and his mysterious silent dog were suddenly the town's unlikely heroes. But while most people saw the event as a simple miracle, one man saw something more. Fire Chief Dave Haskins, a man who had spent 30 years working alongside elite search and rescue canine units, heard the story and knew with the certainty of an expert that miracles are often just instincts we don't yet understand. He visited Liam a week later. Haskins was a man carved from the same rugged Oregon landscape, weathered steady and direct. He came to thank Liam, but his eyes were on Anchor. He watched the dog not as a pet, but as a professional assessing a peer. He saw the methodical way Anchor patrolled the yard, the intense focus in his eyes, the powerful athletic build hidden beneath that quiet demeanor. "Sergeant," Haskins said, his voice laced with curiosity, "that dog, he doesn't move like a normal lab. Where did you say you got him?" Liam recounted the story, the shelter, the puppy mill bust, the silence. Haskins knelt down and with a gentle, practiced hand, he examined Anchor's ear, finding the faint, faded tattoo that was his only link to a forgotten past. "There's a story here," Haskins murmured, "and I have a feeling it's a big one." For the next 2 weeks, the two men became detectives. They followed the cold trail of the tattoo. The initial records led to a shell corporation used to launder money for the puppy mill, a dead end. But Haskins, using contacts deep within the national SAR network, refused to give up. He sent the tattoo number and a photo of Anchor to a community of old-timers, the legends of the search and rescue world. For days, there was nothing but silence. Then the call came. It was from a renowned elderly breeder in Colorado, a man whose kennel was famous for producing some of the most elite FEMA-certified rescue dogs in the world. His voice on the other end of the line was trembling with a decade of unresolved grief. The truth, when it came, was a plot twist more staggering than either of them could have imagined. Anchor wasn't from a puppy mill. He had been stolen from the breeder's kennel as a prized 8-week-old puppy, one of a litter with a legendary bloodline. His grandfather was a hero at Ground Zero after 9/11. His mother served during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. He wasn't just a dog with good instincts. He was canine royalty, a living vessel of courage, intelligence, and a genetic, unshakable drive to save human lives. The puppy mill hadn't just been cruel. It had stolen a hero from the world. Suddenly, everything made sense. Anchor's claustrophobia wasn't just trauma. It was the memory of being snatched and caged. His incredible swimming ability wasn't a fluke. It was the result of generations of specialized training bred into his very DNA. His commanding bark wasn't aggression. It was the voice of a leader, a voice he was born to use. In that moment, Liam's own healing came full circle. He finally understood. He hadn't just rescued a broken dog from a shelter. He had liberated a prisoner of war and returned to him his stolen legacy. His mission had never been to fix Anchor. It was to set him free to become who he was always meant to be. Let's fast forward one final time 1 year later. On a sprawling forested training ground, a team of volunteers practices a search scenario. Liam stands tall, no longer a recluse, but a calm, confident handler. He gives a quiet, single-word command. And Anchor, no longer the silent ghost, springs into action. He moves through the dense woods with a joyful, focused intensity, his nose to the ground, his tail held high. He is a marvel of nature and purpose. Within minutes, he finds the lost hiker letting out a series of deep, triumphant barks. Liam looks on, and for the first time in years, The silence in his soul is no longer an echo of loss. It is a peaceful, profound quiet, filled with the unspoken understanding between two soldiers who had found each other on a forgotten battlefield and led each other home. The story of Liam and Anchor serves as a powerful testament to a simple truth. The deepest wounds often hide the greatest strengths. They remind us that no one is ever too broken to be saved, and that sometimes the most damaged and overlooked souls are just heroes in disguise, waiting for someone to give them a chance to answer the call. If this story of hope and second chances touched your heart, please help us share it by hitting the like button and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. And we believe the most powerful stories are the ones we share together. So tell us in the comments below, have you ever had an animal in your life who rescued you in an unexpected way? We read every single one, and your stories inspire us all. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another tale of courage and compassion. Together, we can keep sharing the stories that remind us of the incredible healing power of a second chance. Thank you for listening.